Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Royler Gracie to defeat Genki Sudo. And I'm here to talk about Jimmy Flick versus Malcolm Gordon. Flick is 16-7 as a pro, 33 years old, and he's given up 2 inches of reach to 33-year-old Gordon, who is 14-7. This is an awesome matchup. Awesome matchup because both guys are very vulnerable fighters, which means we're probably going to see a finish here. And at the same time, it's a fight between two guys that are both maybe fighting for their jobs. I'm sure at least one of them is, if not both of them. So overall, good matchmaking. Malcolm Gordon, he's got 14 wins, 11 finishes. 5 by TKO or knockout or injury, and 6 by submission. I think if he had his way, he'd take his opponent down and out-grapple him. He's got strong grappling and crafty submissions. But here in this fight, he's going to be playing the role of the striker. Because he's up against a guy who is a very unique threat. Particularly deadly on the ground. And particularly not deadly on the feet. Which should be a pleasant surprise and a relief for Malcolm Gordon. Who, much like Jimmy Flick, is vulnerable on the feet. That's where the majority of each of their losses take place. Well, Jimmy Flick, a few of his TKOs take place on the ground, but, it's strikes that get it done, is my point. Malcolm Gordon, he's better offensively, though, on the feet. Visibly better. Sharper striking, more power, heavier punches, and again, the athleticism and physicality where it should help him in certain moments, keeping the fight on the feet, and just that extra, nod to him in the takedown defense department by being the sharper athlete. But again, on the feet, despite being more deadly, Malcolm Gordon is certainly as vulnerable as Jimmy Flick. 5 losses by TKO in his 7 losses. And I've seen 4 of them. He's been knocked out with body shots, leg kicks, and head strikes. He was knocked out by Suma Derji, and he didn't even go unconscious in any of these losses, but he doesn't handle strikes well. Suma Derji hit him with some big, straight punches, and from the first one, he was on ice skates, and then the last one was still inside of a minute. He was finished early. And against Jake Hadley, that was a body shot, a beautiful counter, just fucking beautiful. But still, that one was inside a minute. He was caught cold with a body shot. And even before getting to the UFC, he was TKO'd, chopped down with leg kicks by this guy, Dimitri. It's listed as punches, but it's leg kicks. And that was inside of a round. Another one he got TKO'd in round 2. Even as an amateur, I never saw this fight, but he was TKO'd in 21 seconds. I don't put too much weight on amateur fights, but I always take something away from finish losses. And it's just another strike against his durability. So, he's very vulnerable on the feet, Malcolm Gordon. To the point where Jimmy Flick, who doesn't have one TKO victory in his 16 wins, not one, not by lucky punch, not by cut, not by injury, not by positional ground and pound, it's like a fucking miracle. But Malcolm Gordon's chin is so weak that even I'm thinking, there's a chance Jimmy Flick knocks him out. It'd be like Anthony Perosh knocking out Vinny Magalhaes back in the UFC 10 years ago. But whatever. Sometimes it's all about the chin. So, as much better as Malcolm Gordon is on the feet, it's just he's so vulnerable where whatever. It wouldn't surprise me. But Malcolm Gordon's also been tapped twice. 2 of his losses are by submission. Both of those were in the UFC. They're to high-level guys. Muhammad Makayev armbarred him in round 3. Amir Albazi triangle choked him in round 1. Both were top position submissions, despite them being an armbar and a triangle. And there's forgiveness there with both those losses. I mean, Amir Albazi's knocking on the door of a title shot practically with one more win, maybe a legitimate win. And Muhammad Makayev is, if he's still a prospect, he's the number 1 prospect. But he's fucking surging. So I think there's a little forgiveness there, and those guys have the wrestling and the physicality that Jimmy Flick does not have. But Malcolm Gordon still has awful takedown defense. If he does get taken down, he is in trouble against Jimmy Flick. Jimmy Flick 16 wins, 14 submissions. Most of them in round 1. I don't even know if he's got one in round 2, but he's got a few in round 3 as well, over some of his better opponents. Nate Smith on the Contender Series, even though that was pure dominance, really, from Jimmy Flick. And Johnny Bedford, former UFC fighter. Jimmy Flick took that on short notice and tapped him out with a guillotine in round 3. That's maybe his best win, or tied with his Cody Durden victory in the UFC debut. Jimmy Flick triangle choked Cody Durden and then retired. And he was gone for a few years, and then he came back, took 2 fights last year, and was TKO'd in both of them. He's got 7 losses. 6 of them are by TKO. What makes him a little forgivable is that they're all to UFC level opponents. Every one of them. I mean, Alessandro Costa and Charles Johnson took him out last year. Those were both in the UFC. Before that, he lost to Chris Gutierrez, Ray Rodriguez, and Will Capuzano, UFC fighters, and Levi Moles, who is a very good fighter who could be in the UFC right now. And that guy got him out of there with ground and pound, actually. That was a round 2 TKO. So there's a little forgiveness in that he's only lost to UFC-level fighters like that, but still, you add him up, and it's 6 TKOs and 7 losses. It's not pretty for his health and his profile as a fighter. And Jimmy Flick did not look good in those last 2 TKO losses. He looked flat as fuck against Charles Johnson and Alessandro Costa. And while I consider those guys to be better than Malcolm Gordon, again, I think if Jimmy Flick is not purely dominant in this fight, where he's able to consistently take down Malcolm Gordon and control him on his way to an eventual submission, I think if it's competitive at all, I think Jimmy Flick will be the first to crumble and fatigue and fade. He just has not looked like a gritty fighter as of late. So I'm picking Malcolm Gordon. And I have bet on Malcolm Gordon, but I also think Jimmy Flick could win with a submission. I think if Jimmy Flick does win the wrestling battle, which he's got weak wrestling overall, but he's still got wrestling and he's got some crafty takedowns, some well-timed entries. He's a technician. Everything needs to be well-timed. But if he does get on top of Malcolm Gordon, he is the better grappler and the much more dangerous grappler. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if he was able to put Malcolm Gordon away. But I'm taking Gordon. I think he's going to be able to keep this fight on the feet and beat Jimmy Flick up. I don't think he'll go through him in the way that these other guys have, but I think he will get a TKO in one way or another. And of course, power can always get things done early. Malcolm Gordon is the play and the pick, minus 130. The finish, the over-under is set at 1.5 rounds, which I don't love, even though the odds are very close, minus 130 for under 1.5 rounds. I'm going to wait to see what the under 2.5 round looks like once that comes about, or even the pure finish prop. But I'm very sure this one ends via finish. I think the odds of this going the distance are, well, I don't want to say it out loud because now it's definitely going to go the distance, but it shouldn't happen. These are 2 very vulnerable fighters. I think it's going to end in a finish either way, but again, I'm picking Malcolm Gordon. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit. Check out my other videos.